All right, here we go. This is that moment of truth. This is that moment of truth where I have to see it. I have to see it and believe it. I hope everyone's well. We're just waiting for everything to get in here. It takes a minute. So we'll give we're also a little bit early today. So I'll give everybody a chance to filter in. All right, we're on the YouTube. What's up, YouTube? How are you? Hope you're wonderful. Let's just wait for the Rockfin here. The Rockfin takes a little bit longer. But it looks like we're on the Rockfin too. What's up, everybody? What's up? We are live. We are doing it. We're a little early. I'll let people trickle in because we're a little early today, but I'm really excited to talk to my guests. So, officially, what's up, everybody? Good afternoon to all the East Coasters trickling in. How was your lunch? Did you have a good one? Are you eating a balanced diet? You should. Do your best. Good morning to all my West Coasters. Good morning. It's in Southern California where I'm at. It was actually a little rainy this morning. It was a bit. I felt a little bit. What's the word for it? Just a little stumbly getting out of bed. Just a little like all right, it's morning again. And my cat will have this moment where at a particular time, like clockwork, she's ready to get up. At first, she'll just be chilling. And she'll like when I first kind of started stirring, she was like, "Yeah, we're still sleeping," and went back to sleep on the pillow. But then exactly 20 minutes later, she was up in my face. Like, it's time to get up. I don't need an alarm clock, is what I'm saying, folks. Anyway, good evening to everyone where it's an evening time zone. And of course, to everyone out in the future, New Zealand, Australia. How's the future? Can you solve climate change for the rest of us? We're counting on you. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Our friends over at ZT.com, ZHITEA.com, their tea kind of rules. Our friends over at triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. Trendy name makes topical pain oil for your body, and he educates the public on cannabis-related issues. Also, Indie Left. Indie Left is the only place to find all of the articles and videos from all the content creators and streamers you know and love. They keep a nice list of everyone there. I am on it. It gets updated twice a day. To learn more about everything they got going on, to subscribe to all of the things you can subscribe to, and to join their Discord community, check them out at independentleft.media. That's independentleft.media. And yours truly did their theme song. I did their theme song, which if you want your own theme song, patreon.com/Rob Lacombe. For a give what you can level, I'll make you your own theme song. All right, without further ado, I'm real excited to talk to my guest today. I'm real excited to bring him in, and I got to give a little bit of a backstory here. So when I was growing up, I got into punk rock at a pretty young age. Around the time of 12 years old, I started getting into the music, and I started going to shows as soon as I could. And back then, there would be a lot of people tabling at shows in different organizations. I don't know if they still use the word tabling. I'm imagining that's still what people say, but there'd be a lot of organizations tabling, and they would be anti-war organizations, or they'd be an animal rights organization, or some kind of organization like that. And one of the organizations that was always there, always there, that I got exposed to at a very young age was Food Not Bombs. And Food Not Bombs is still going strong to this day. And they've been facing a little bit, they've been having a little bit of dilemma with the town of Santa Cruz demonizing them, because if there's one thing we can't tolerate in the United States, it's helping out hungry people. That's something we don't do that here. You don't do that here. Well, actually, people do. And it's a shame that the people that do aren't supported better and are instead demonized. But we're talking about that today. So please welcome to the show the co-founder of Food Not Bombs, Keith McHenry. Keith, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's exciting. Cool.
Good to talk to you.
So you may have. So if you were in Southern California at these punk shows?
No, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So this would have been Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. But punk has been a huge part. I mean, we initially, we connected ourselves to punk in 1980 because we felt that would be the new, like the rock music of the hippie era and the anti-war era before us, that would be our thing. And it's amazing how important punk has been in Food Not Bombs. In fact, a tour of one punk band toured the Philippines, and I was over visiting Food Not Bombs there, and they bought a kettle. After every show, they would buy this giant brass kettle and give it to the local people, and then organize a Food Not Bombs meal that day. And then now there's 50 cities in the Philippines that do Food Not Bombs, and the same thing happened with another group that toured Indonesia, and there's 100 cities in Indonesia that have Food Not Bombs just from this one punk tour. So it's had a.
Do you remember who the bands were, or are they still around?
Oh, well, yeah. And those bands, one was like I can't remember. It was a really great name. The French band from Daejeon. I think it was like Crusty Dumpster Fire Punks or something like that. I would have to look up. It's in my. Actually, I do have that in this book that I'm working on, because I just can't remember the name of it. But there was, but the classic punk bands of Food Not Bombs would be, of course, Propagandhi, Chumbawamba, Bad Brains, Dead Kennedys. MDC was our house band in San Francisco for years. Aleve started the Food Not Bombs chapter in Richmond, Virginia. So it's we've had like Fat Records, Good Riddance, and all of them have done a ton of Food Not Bombs work. And then and I'm just amazed, like all these years later, I tour the world with Food Not Bombs, and it's always a punk show. And yes, it's called tabling. And it is pretty amazing that this, who would have thought like 40 years ago, punk would be a scene that would still be DIY and everything. And I think probably the most famous punk band connected to Food Not Bombs, if you want to call it a punk band still, I don't know what people call it, but was Green Day, who relied on us for food at East Bay Food Not Bombs in People's Park, and then became our cooks, and then eventually and played Gilman Street. A lot of our connection is between us and Gilman Street. And then became the mega stars that they became. And their first stadium concert, they donated all the money to East Bay Food Not Bombs, San Francisco Food Not Bombs, and the San Francisco Coalition of the Homeless. So that was their launching of their main label. So we have a huge connection with the punk scene and music and Food Not Bombs.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, yeah, and it is very cool how all that stuff gets passed down, I mean, because I started going to shows it would have been like the late 90s, and then throughout the aughts, and I still, when the world's open, I still try to go to shows when I can, but it's it's a new generation now, and there's a big, especially here in Los Angeles, there's a big house show scene and stuff like that, and just a whole new generation of doing things. But a lot of I guess a lot of the ethos is still largely the same, and you still see organizations like Food Not Bombs around, which it really is a special thing. So I want to talk about what's going on, but I did want to spend a little bit of time on the history, which you've already touched on. So how exactly did Food Not Bombs get started? Let's give a summary from the very beginning, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So first, I was a produce worker at a store called Bread and Circus in Central Square, Cambridge, when I was studying painting and sculpture at Boston University. And that's a great trick if you're a student, because you got to have everything ready by the time the store opens, and then you got the whole day to go to classes and stuff. So I was throwing out all this produce every day. It was right at the beginning of organics being something interesting and happening. And a lot of people didn't understand what some of the food was, because people were used to, just like golden delicious apples, and that would be your thing. But we'd have Fujis and everything. So a lot would go to waste at the beginning. Actually, it turned out it still goes to waste. But that was my impression at the time. I was like kind of freaked out by the amount of food I was throwing away. So I started taking it to the housing projects about 3 blocks away on Portland Avenue. And one day I'm hanging with the people after we're distributing the food, or while I'm distributing the food, and they're telling me that the building across the street is a lab where they're designing nuclear weapons. So this is like 1979, 1980. And that's where I get the name Food Not Bombs from, is from the fact that we were giving food to people that were desperate for it across the street from a weapons lab in a brand new glass building behind MIT. So then the second thing that happened was I was attending, I took American history with Howard Zinn, and kind of floated in that kind of anarchist community at Boston University. And so he taught.
Let me ask you a quick question. Just
Yeah, no problem.
is that home originally? Are you from the Northeast originally?
Well, my mom is from Boston, and my mom's side of the family is from Boston, and that had a huge influence in why I do Food Not Bombs, because my grandfather was OSS and directed what's said to be the world's largest bombing campaign, even today, which was Operation Meeting House, which killed tens of thousands of people in Tokyo during World War II. And he was an advocate of dropping the atomic bomb on Hanoi during the Vietnam War. And I used to watch him argue with McNamara, Curtis LeMay, Westmoreland on the phone, trying to get him to do one more nuke to send a message to communist China and the Soviet Union. So anyway, but then I actually grew up in national parks. So I was born in Frankfurt, West Germany. My dad was in the same unit as Elvis Presley. That's supposed to be my big claim to fame, is I had stewed spinach at the mess hall with Elvis Presley. but then I came to the United States.
Was he a guy? Did he talk at all?
I have no idea. My dad didn't know his music, knew he was famous, didn't know why.
Okay.
Even though they spoke, because they were in the armored division together, and he was that was his job. But anyway, so then I ended up, my grandfather on the other side was one of the first park rangers in the National Park Service. And so my dad became a ranger, I became a ranger, my sister became a ranger. So I grew up in national parks. So I lived at Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Big Bend, Texas, Everglades, Shenandoah National Park, Boston Historic Park. And then I worked at Boston Historic Park and at Fire Island in Long Island. So I spent up until I went to college basically living in national parks primarily.
Okay, so let's get back to, you were taking a class with Howard Zinn.
Yeah, so I'd taken a class with Howard Zinn, and he talked about how he was going to these protests against Seabrook Nuclear Power Station in New Hampshire, which is not about 45 minutes from Boston, in the state just north of Massachusetts. And so I got interested in that, and I started going to the meetings, and eventually went to a couple of the large protests, the October 6th occupation attempt of Seabrook's nuclear power plant's construction site. And then I returned again with hundreds and hundreds, several thousand more people. Ultimately, I think there was maybe 5,000 people trying to storm the construction site on May 24th, 1980. And one of my friends, who was a law student at BU, got arrested, Brian Feigenbaum, and we found a wealthy person to bail him out. He was charged with assault, felony assault of a police officer with a deadly weapon. He was chosen as the person to charge because he was also on the media. His name was under his face on TV, so they could identify him. Most of the several thousand of us were not willing to be identified because it was such an intense experience, and there was lots of tear gas, and it was both of those actions were life-changing for the people at them. And then anyways, we had to raise money to pay the guy back who bailed him out, and we were doing bake sales that were completely unsuccessful. And at the same time, I had a moving company called Smooth Move, which was this old beat-up Dodge van. And we were moving this family, and they were throwing away a poster called "Wouldn't it be beautiful if the schools had all the money they needed and the Air Force had to hold a bake sale to buy a bomber." So since we took that, put it on cardboard, bought some military uniforms at the Army Navy surplus store, and then we went out on at Harvard Square in the Boston Commons, dressed as soldiers, trying to buy a bomber with our baked goods. And we didn't really make any more money, but we did have people stop and hang out with us, and we found it was a good way to do outreach about nuclear weapons and the nuclear power industry. And so that finally brought us to the idea where we thought, well, we should dress up as hobos and have a soup line outside the stockholders meeting of the Bank of Boston. And that we had discussed, we had a thing called the First National Bank Project that was a spinoff of Clamshell, like a committee in it, and trying to direct our interests toward the financial support for the nuclear industry. And we discovered that the board of directors of the company building the nuclear power station were also on the boards of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and so on. And so we made a flyer. I made a flyer that talked about the interlocking board of directors and that their policies and the Reagan administration's policies would ultimately lead to a future in America where people might have to stand in line to eat at a soup kitchen, because that didn't happen at that time that would be March 26, 1981. And so we didn't do a lot of outreach. We were busy with all kinds of, partying and stuff. So we were realized at the last moment that we better find some people to look like hobos. And our idea was to go to the Pine Street Inn shelter. And I went there at midnight, gave a speech to the guys. Their response was quite fascinating. Back then, they didn't have beds at shelters. You just sat on a tile floor or a tile bench. And they were all like, oh, this is great. A protest like the 60s. That's so cool. And the next day, the people showed up and people were shocked, business people particularly. I remember one guy who had gotten out of South Station. This is in front of the Federal Reserve Bank on Atlantic Avenue in Boston. And he was like, wow, Reagan's only been in power like a month. And look, we've already got soup lines in America. This is outrageous. And so I think that the fact that it's 40 years later almost to the day of that event, that it's kind of shocking that a person that just turned 22, I'd been 22 for less than a month by this time, would be doing this kind of like organizing, believing that there would be a future where people would stand in line. And sadly, we were.
You were proven right. Yeah,
Yep.
you were proven right. I mean, maybe you didn't predict that they'll be in cars in some of the situations.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't predict that part. I don't know, but yeah, you were proven correct regardless.
It was like and so that's the we were a street performance group. We were at the beginning. We were influenced by the Living Theater, which was we actually provided food for their theater games.
Now, what is that?
So the Living Theater was a 60s theater company, and they actually had this idea of getting rid of all the walls of the theater, and therefore involving the public, creating an event where the public themselves became the actors in the event, and that there would and it would just set up the conditions so that ultimately whatever happened on the street became the theater, and they did that. Mostly they were active in Manhattan, but My Dinner with Andre, which is a movie that came out decades ago, features one of our friends. She's featured in the film, kind of like because she was the one that was out in the Polish woods with her lover instead of doing the theater games, and Andre was upset about that. But anyway, so they did this kind of living theater stuff all over the world. For a while, they lived in Italy. Now they're back in Manhattan. But that was our background, was them, and then giant puppets like Bread and Puppet Theater. And so we were coming from an art, to me, it was performance art. That was what the purpose of Food Not Bombs was, is to do performance art about political ideas that and get the people like stirred up. And so that's why having a soup line would catch your attention. Sadly, that does not get anybody's attention anymore. But at the time, it was a shock. And so much of our street theater around food was like that, and that was the purpose of it. And so sometimes we would be soldiers, sometimes we would do. We also were very into graffiti. I did a lot of stenciling. I had a stencil of a mushroom cloud, where the shadow of the mushroom cloud was actually a silhouette of the United States, and I had the word that said the question today ? And we'd spray paint that all over town. Whenever there was a massacre in El Salvador, because we were organizing a lot around that, we would do what we call dead bodies, where we would chalk the outline of a dead people and then spray paint them white and fill plazas with as many of these as possible. And then there became a thing called the Shadow Project, where people all over the United States did that and painted a circle for what would happen if a 1 megaton bomb hit your community, things like that. So then we try to mix the visual arts, the theater, music, and all that all together to create like what we hoped would be a future where people would be taken care of, and then it would, Thatcherism and Reaganism and all that would be rejected ultimately. Taking a long time for that.
Yeah, we're still working on that future. Absolutely. But so, well, then how did it become? I mean, first of all, how did you end up in California? And then also simultaneously, how did this start building into I guess I was going to say national movement, but I think it's fair to say international movement that it is today. I mean, how did all that blossom?
Okay, I was a graphic designer in Boston as part. I had a thing called Brushfire Graphics, and that was part of the whole. So I was making my living doing that, and I had one of my clients was the Boston Red Sox, and
now who is? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Who is that? Is that a theater group? What's that?
Yeah. So anyway, they are a theater group, quite frankly. Which is, and then and I grew up. Me and my grandfather would take me to see the Red Sox as a kid, and anyway, so I had the Celtics account, I had the Red Sox account, I had the Patriots account, all through, and so that was all happening, and then there was the World Series was going to happen with the Mets, and Bill Buckner was going to miss the ball and during the 7th game and lose the World Series, which was something that was discussed well in advance of the actual event. So anyway, so we were around that same time. There became this idea that we should get rid of homeless people because that was hurting retail business, and so our neighborhood was the Kenmore Association. So I started. I was approached by the business. I volunteered for the local business association, and they asked me to take a photo of this black guy and put a red circle around it and say wanted out at Kenmore Square. And I'm like, I just will not do that. That person is my friend. That's my friend, Mr. Butch. We love him. He's loved by the Red Sox fans. That would kill our business in the community. I don't think that's wise. But then there became like a very intense friction as a result. My wife at the time and myself and a lot of people in that neighborhood who loved the people that lived outside were horrified, and so we started to organize, and eventually it got so intense that it was clear that I would be killed if I did not leave town. So I did, and then I ended up out west, and I thought, well, liberal San Francisco, America's most liberal city, this will be fantastic. I was inspired to start it when acquaintance of mine from Veterans for Peace, Brian Wilson, was hit by a train blocking arms shipments to El Salvador, and he lost his legs. And I had worked with him when he was doing Fast for Peace in Boston many years before that. So anyway, I started Food Not Bombs at the entrance to Golden Gate Park with a bunch of young people that I'd met when I moved to San Francisco. And it was just every Monday. It was fantastic. Then a hippie came by and said we could get a permit. So we wrote to the person he suggested we write to. We did not hear any response back from that city official at Recreation and Parks Department. But on August 15th of 88, approximately 45 riot police appeared out of Golden Gate Park, arrested 9 of us in what became the first arrest for sharing free food of Food Not Bombs. And very incredible photos came from that were in the paper the next day of riot police guarding the food, and people became enraged and then wanted to come back the next Monday. So we started having these marches every Monday to Golden Gate Park, where we would get arrested. Ultimately, I think it was 94 people were arrested by the end of Labor Day of that year. And the anger caused people to call. And at that time, since I'd been living in the back of a truck at the beginning of my experience of San Francisco, I had a answering service at mailboxes, etc., which I'm sure does not exist anymore. And and I got my mail there. And the poor guys running that company, it was $5 for an unlimited number of calls coming in. Well, he had to hire 2 people to deal with it, and asked me to stop using. And he turned me on to this idea of the new invention called answering machines. So I got an answering machine and so on. So anyway, I had taken notes on how I helped start the second group, and I made a flyer called 7 Steps to Starting the Food Not Bombs. And I even suggested you buy an answering machine in that flyer, and I would mail those to you. Sometimes people would just write Food Not Bombs San Francisco on the envelope, and we would get the
wow.
the mail back in those days. And I even received a correspondence from Europe that just said Food Not Bombs San Francisco, California, USA on the envelope.
And this was before the punk bands really started touring alongside the brand. This was like before that. This was just word had spread about what you guys were doing in San Francisco.
Yeah, that news of the arrest just captured. So we made the Times of India, the New York Times, the London Times. We were on CNN, which was a relatively, I think it had only been around a year or two by that time. I remember the former mayor, Joe Alioto, was on vacation in Italy watching the riot police arrest people and take the food from people, and was outraged and was quoted in the local San Francisco papers as being mortified that this was happening in his community. But ultimately, so there was a total of 1,000 arrests in San Francisco over the course of 8 years. We had to develop a program where we had decoy food, where we would have 3 or 4 people would arrive with buckets with very little food in it. The police would arrest them and take that equipment. Another wave would come in. They would get arrested. And then we would come with all the rest of the food to make sure everybody did get fed. And the police, for whatever reason, never came on the third occasion, even though we had a flyer on our table that detailed that that's exactly what we were going to do. And that's in my second book called Hungry for Peace. I have a copy of that flyer. But then the other thing we had to do, because it was like we were now sharing every day. Mother Teresa's group, Sisters of Charity, got kicked out of Civic Center Plaza, so we took over their slot. So we did lunch and dinner every day at City Hall, and were arrested virtually every day. And so we started a campaign called Risk Arrest, 1 day a month with Food Not Bombs. And then church groups and so on would come out and get arrested, serving the food. And then the Lawyers Guild, National Lawyers Guild, joined us one time. They came, they had their banner saying National Lawyers Guild. And then the police actually didn't rush in and arrest everybody like normal, and let the lawyers serve the food, but they arrested the people that were handed the food because it appeared that they were not going to arrest lawyers. So that went on, and that just spawned off like groups all over. And in 1992, we did our first World Gathering in San Francisco, and we decided to hold it in San Francisco in October of 1992 because First Nations people, Aboriginal people, had called for a giant protest against the Columbus invasion of the New World. And Nancy Pelosi was able to arrange to have San Francisco be the official city to celebrate the 500th anniversary, and because of the Columbus Avenue Parade. And we had our meeting for 2 days, came up with our principles, which are that the food is always vegan or vegetarian and free to anyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober, that there be no presidents, directors, or headquarters, that every chapter be autonomous and include the people relying on the food in the decision-making of the local chapter, and that we would not be a charity, but that we'd be dedicated to nonviolent direct action to change society so no one had to eat at a Food Not Bombs or be live in the park or live in the streets. And then we reconfirmed that in 95 at a much larger Food Not Bombs gathering that involved probably roughly 1,000 people. The meeting itself only had about maybe 200. And then that's been our foundation ever since. And it's those the 7 steps to starting Food Not Bombs and the 3 principles, which have been shared on these punk tours after every wave of arrests. When Fort Lauderdale got arrested, a whole lot of new chapters started up after that. When Brixton got arrested, more chapters started up because of that. When Prague got arrested, more chapters started up. When Belarus gets arrested, more groups start. Moscow, Russia gets arrested, more groups start up. So there's that kind of a pattern that has happened, and which has encouraged the creation of more chapters, as well as just the people now contacting us because the amount of people living outside in their community is so intense. They want to do something, and so now it's just kind of almost every day there's a new chapter or a chapter that died restarting. And so now we're at least 1,000 cities of the world and at least 65 countries of the world.
Wow. Yeah, that was my next question, was going to be like, how many chapters are there presently? So you're saying at least 1,000.
Yes, we have. We just updated the map, I believe, in the last 3 days on our website, foodonbombs.net. And we have listed there at least 780 chapters, something of that nature.
Wow.
We are missing many of the Russian chapters. We know that there's hundreds in Russia. We get inklings of that every once in a while, what's going on there. We don't even have most of the cities in Indonesia listed. We only have a few of the cities in India that are listed. And it's kind of exciting. It's like a Easter egg hunt every day for me, because I will find 2 or 3 new chapters, and just on like a Google alert that come in or something, or like all of a sudden on Instagram I find like a bunch of chapters I never knew, or on platforms I didn't even know existed, and things like that. So it's pretty exciting. It's like a birthday party every day for me. The new Food on Bombs chapter every day.
Well, I want to ask you one more question before we jump to what's going on now. And that is, I'm just curious, what was it like for you, just emotionally, when that initial arrest happened, and you had to digest, no pun intended, the whole notion that you're being arrested for helping hungry people?
Well, for me, it was a super big shock. I was kind of in a daze. So I had just gotten out of the hospital a block away from having a ruptured appendix and a week on morphine in the hospital. So I went down there not expecting to be arrested at all, but I had heard we'd had already some problems, and there was rumors that something could happen. And so I was like blown away that it's one of those events that kind of you disassociate from, in part because of probably the morphine fog, but part because it was such a huge shock. And things got very heavy in San Francisco. I mean, I was clubbed between the eyes during the Rodney King uprising when an officer yelled my name, and I turned to see who called me, and he hit me as hard as he could with a nightstick, which fortunately broke the nightstick, but it's also been a lifelong struggle with my face. And after several 2 operations, I was I was captured several times and placed in a stress position cage for 3 days each time after they ripped my ligaments and tendons. I faced 25 to life right after the 3 strikes law came into effect here in California. I got my first strike where I was framed by the mayor's office on the 4th of January. Got my second and third strikes in mid-May. That also encouraged a lot of people to start Food on Bombs chapters around the world. Ended up having to, they sent riot police to each of my court appearances. We had a special metal detector for that. My home phone was wiretapped, according to San Francisco Police Department internal documents that we received in one of our many federal lawsuits against the city at that time. And we had come to learn that we were declared in September of 1988 one of America's most hardcore terrorist groups. And there was a workshop run by the National Guard armories all across America where we were featured. We learned this because on Thanksgiving vacation that year, people would wear the Food Not Bombs button on their coats, and National Guard personnel would approach them at the airports and explain what they had learned about this hardcore terrorist group.
Hardcore terrorist. You're called Food Not Bombs.
Exactly.
It's called. Did they have it backwards? Were they like, if it was called Bombs Not Food, then I could see up maybe that's a terrorist group. They're called Bombs Not Food. You're called Food Not Bombs. And in the U.S., terrorists.
Exactly. The State Department did a lecture in April of that was on C-SPAN. I saw it on C-SPAN, April of 2009, comparing the people that served the free vegan meals in the parks to Al Qaeda, who's more dangerous.
Oh my God.
They said that the Al Qaeda would probably not even exist another 20 years, but the people with the vegan meals could go for another 30 years, and that the problem with the people with the vegan meals is they were convincing the American public that money should be diverted from military spending to education, healthcare, and other social services, and that would then undermine the national defense, so we could not fight groups like Al Qaeda.
And they said that with a straight face. They're like, we're eventually going to stop these terrorists, but these terrorists going around with their apples and their and their granola, and hungry people aren't hungry anymore. The agony, it's chaos.
Exactly. So it's been yeah. I mean, to me, that was a mark of like, I think I might be on the right path. If the government thinks I'm a terrorist for doing this, and they think my friends are terrorists for doing this, and they're actually worried that the American public would walk by our meal or eat with us and see the banner saying "Food Not Bombs," and therefore go, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Food, not bombs. Why are we spending $700 billion a year on bombs when regular people are out taking recovered food from natural food stores to feed the country?"
That's what happened to me, man. I mean, no kidding. Like that's literally what happened to me as a kid. I can't remember, Keith. Like I remember every single detail because I mean, I used to go to a lot of shows. It probably kept me out of a lot of trouble. Well, it definitely kept me out of trouble. But and I remember my first direct encounter where I saw Food Not Bombs, and I was a kid, so I didn't know much about anything. And they did say to me, they're like, do you know how much we spend on defense each year? Do you know what we're doing around the world? And instead of feeding hungry people, this is what we do. And even as, a young kid, I was like, well, that's really awesome what you guys are doing. And that's really messed up what we're doing. And then, I guess, look at how it all ended up.
Yeah, essentially. This is a really golden era for Food Not Bombs because we're getting a lot more bombs, and we need a lot more food. So, I think we are, maybe the State Department's right. We're going to convince people that money should be spent on food and not on bombs. But it's very.
I just picture this insane Orwellian newscast where they're just like, what do you think is more dangerous, this orange or this grenade? Well, the answer might surprise you. Let us introduce you to terrorist organization Food Not Bombs.
Exactly.
Going around the community, helping the less fortunate.
Well, then that brings us to today in Santa Cruz. So
yes,
the problem for the city of Santa Cruz is that we are visible on the streets. And we have, allegedly the most liberal Democrats running our community. We even had a Marxist at one point as the mayor of this community, although he was one of the most vocal supporters of anti-homeless laws, because homeless people are the lumpen proletariat, and how can you organize them, obviously, from his point of view. So it's kind of not...
So he was a Marxist who made anti-homeless legislation.
Correct, yes.
Not like in the sense of helping houseless people, but demonizing houseless people.
Correct. He made some nice laws where you weren't allowed to sit downtown, outside. He supported the removal of flower boxes that unhoused people were leaning against, strengthened the anti-sleeping law, those kind of things. So, I mean, that's very typical of Santa Cruz, where we are the first to have a chief of police take a knee with the mayor in front of the anti-homeless fence they had put up the day before in honor of Black Lives Matter. They actually created their own Black Lives Matter protest the day before the actual real Black Lives Matter protest, so they could scoop it and get their photos in the paper and that kind of thing. So they're really, we're a sanctuary city for everyone but unhoused people. We're a nuclear-free zone, even though we do nuclear research at the university. We're, every beautiful. We were one of the first to have Black Lives Matter painted in front of City Hall on the sidewalk, while majority of the Black people in our town are unhoused and are being arrested for being unhoused, having their belongings confiscated, those kind of things. That's a typical Santa Cruz.
So here's what you tweeted here. The city of Santa Cruz is threatening to evict Food Not Bombs again, claiming they will arrest us if we don't stop sharing food with the hungry in their empty parking lot. You got to stop this. You got to stop helping. I mean, this sentence should be an Onion headline. This shouldn't be real life. This should actually read, the city of Santa Cruz met with me and said, hey, we want to fund everything you do and properly employ you because what you're doing is essential for any community. That's what this should say. But instead it says, they're threatening to evict us because we keep sharing food with hungry people in an empty parking lot. It's think of the empty parking lot's feelings. You're invading the empty parking lot's privacy. The empty parking lot is just trying to tweet in silence here, and you're helping out hungry people.
Exactly. So right when the pandemic, so we're about to celebrate the 365th day of doing it every single day in Santa Cruz. And we thought we would do it a month or two for every day until the other food programs came back online, but they never did come back online. So we've been out there the whole time. And there, at the very beginning, they shut down the only bathrooms with water. You couldn't charge a cell phone if you had to. We were everything for hundreds and hundreds of unhoused people in this town. If you needed something, we were it. And that's so we were evicted. So in, I think it was like March 19th or 20th, something around that time, we had gotten news that there was all this money promised to Santa Cruz County, particularly, to put people who had in hotel rooms who lived outside. Right, it was called Operation Room Key. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it happened throughout California, and here in Los Angeles, we had they were promised a certain number, and it was grossly under that. It was significantly less. And recently, an organization called Street Watch caught the mayor, or he actually acknowledged them, and he actually literally said, find me some hotel rooms and we'll get on it. Basically, hey, yeah. Find me the room. I'm just the mayor. I don't know how to possibly contact hotels or anything like that. I don't have any resource. I have billions for police. How can I possibly uphold this thing? Why don't you, reach out to the hotels and then you can call our office. We'll ignore you. And they've still grossly underdelivered.
Yeah. Well, I had like a long conversation with the mayor. So our city decided they would do what they called triage centers instead. So what that was chain link fences in all the parking lots downtown with a portable toilet in each one. And then you were supposed to go into them and they would give you like a $25 tent to sleep in. They would take up most of your belongings and discard them for you. And then you could sit there for 72 hours being triaged, which actually just meant you sat there for 72 hours. Fortunately, during the first sweep of homeless people, they put about 16 people in one of these triage centers. And of course, there was no food or water. So we provided the food and water to their triage center. But they were trying to get us to lure all the unhoused people into these triage centers with using our good name as to endorse this crazy campaign, and we refused to do it. We encouraged them to start putting some people in hotels under this program just as a good faith thing. And then we would be willing to work with the city, but they had lied in federal court in an earlier case than ours, where they claimed all the unhoused people would be housed during a camp eviction. And of course, that did not happen. I think 20 people got 2 nights in a hotel room. Another 60 people were put in the gravel yard and let to stay there, of the nearly 300 people in this place. So anyway, we decided we would, I had just sold some farmland in New Mexico that I had been doing workshops on organic gardening, called the Food Not Bombs Free School. And I took that money and some money for being a vegan that I received as an award. And one morning, I just went up Ocean Street, went into each hotel, said I'd like to rent 10 rooms in each hotel. By the end of the day, I had 180 beds, or I had 81 beds reserved on the first day. I paid $100 per room for each of these rooms. I did I made a voucher, hotel voucher. We had the Santa Cruz Union of the Homeless, our Santa Cruz Homeless Union, organized, like our officers were assigned to each hotel to monitor events. It worked so well. We did it again the next day for 180 people. We did another 180 people the day after that, and then we did 125 people on the fourth day. And then I ran out of the $20,000 that I had allotted for that I did have, that no longer had, because I paid 11% of that was hotel tax that went to the city. So then anyway, but we were evicted from where we had been sharing food because of the hotel voucher giveaway. They claimed it was an illegal rally, it was illegal protest, blah, 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 even though they arrested our social distancing marker woman for vandalism, and that interfered with our ability to put out all the markers and so on. But
what kind of country do we live in? I mean, really, it's like what the hey, we're feeding hungry people in this parking lot. That's not okay. Hey, we're actually, these houseless people, we're giving them hotel rooms. Still not okay. Still not okay. I what do you think this is? What do you think this is? It's like,
yeah. So I'm still under investigation for what they call counterfeit hotel vouchers, which I actually were backed by $100 for every room. The hotel people are fine getting $100. There's nobody going to vacation in Santa Cruz. We have enough for every single unhoused person could have their own room, hotel room in this city, from all the abandoned hotels that, empty hotels, or hotels that are being constructed that are just sitting there because nobody's coming there to stay in these hotels. I mean, there's one just went online this week with enough for many, many people. So that we ended up getting evicted repeatedly through the entire 12 months. And this is still
going on currently. They're kicking you out of this parking lot for doing Food Not Bombs. Is that what's going on?
Exactly. So we're supposed to be arrested on March 1st. That we did not get arrested on March 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, or any of, we haven't been arrested yet in this round of repression. We're having a very hard time finding a new location to move to, and so that's been kind of our main focus. And we're just not moving until we can find an adequate place. So in the lower article that you had on the Twitter account there, that we were just we had been kicked out of the current parking lot that we're in now, so because they claimed they're going to put a bunch of equipment in there to repair the levees. Well, they fenced that off after they evicted us. That was on the 200th day of nonstop serving every day for 200 days. They planned the eviction on that day when we had an event planned for that day. No equipment ever ended up in that parking lot. It was just a closed, fenced-off parking lot for months, until a bunch of young anarchists in town took all the fencing down and delivered it to the police department, and just sealed off the entire police department with their fences. And so, but we liked where we were. There was nice trees in the parking lot that we were in. Then one day, a guy shows up and said, "Oh, wow, we're going to start building luxury condos here tomorrow. You have to get out of here. we had bought a shipping container because we were at the amount of, it's just been like, we've had forest fires. So we had to deal with all the fire evacuees. It's been insane. So we actually, in the end, we realized it was such a pain in the neck to make 3-4 trips with our van with all of our equipment and have to drive sometimes like 10 minutes out of town to some place to store it and come back, get more, So we got this 20-foot shipping container, and they say, like, we're going to remove it today because we go to $100 million escrow tomorrow. There can't be anything on this lot. So we were able to, keep them from stealing it, which meant I was on the phone all day until 9:30 that night. And I went and rented a truck. We had to unload the shipping container, moved it across the street to the current lot, and then reload it again. And then we get an email from the city that you're going to be arrested on the 1st of March if you don't leave immediately, and you've got to remove your shipping container immediately. And so I met with a person from the city who had sent the email and showed him what our operation was. We suggested a bunch of locations to go to, and has been 100% the case with this city. I wrote a little report of what I thought we had agreed on at the meeting, sent it to all the pertinent city officials and community members. We eventually get just another email back from the city attorney's office saying you will be arrested, you must leave, But that was our last official correspondence with the city. We're also suing the city with the Santa Cruz Homeless Union to block the eviction of 150, 200 people from a park called San Lorenzo Park. They were organizing what we were calling the holiday evictions. They had 3 phases of these holiday evictions. We tried to block them from the phase 1, but failed. The community did come together. They had the city again, and I think the city manager or somebody has a cousin that rents chain link fences because it's the most common thing that they're just always bringing in chain link fences. And so they fenced off the area that they had secured from the unhoused people during phase 1. So the community just removed all the fences and used it as a way to block the police from entering the park. That gave us a little breathing room, so we were able to file our injunction, and we still have that injunction. On the 17th, we will be before a federal judge to see if this injunction will be continued. This is the second lawsuit that the homeless themselves have filed. The first one, which was the birth of the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, was an attempt to block the eviction of about 300 people who were found safety in a vacant lot behind Ross Dress for Less. And those people were forced into the doorways and into the streets. A lot of women had joined that camp, as is the case with the current camp, because it is not safe to be an unhoused woman by yourself in a doorway. Sadly, during the first wave, the first eviction after we lost our injunction on the case in May of 2018, we did lose a number of friends, including the named plaintiff of that lawsuit. Desiree Quintera was killed in her camp trying to help another group of campers during the Diablo winds when a redwood tree fell on her and crushed her. And she's one of the known victims of that eviction. We've also come across women who were brutally raped afterwards and sexually assaulted, who were found safety in that camp. And so, this is a life and death situation. And this new law that they just passed this morning, actually at 1 a.m., will make things even more brutal for the unhoused, and more people will die as a direct result. And it just makes you think that if it's pretty clear that the majority of the leadership of the city council and of the city government would prefer to go out with AR-15s and start just gunning down homeless people, but that's not polite. And if you're liberal, you're not allowed to kill them directly like that. So the best way to kill them is by taking their belongings, taking their blankets, taking their tents, forcing them into doorways where they could just be randomly killed or die of illness and so on. One of my best friends lived on the street. He was a carpenter, master carpenter, Bob Reese. And and I tried through the whole pandemic to get him a hotel room. He had had heart failure and a stroke, and he had a CPAP machine. It took me a month to find a church that would let him sleep in the church and plug his CPAP machine in. He sadly died right within the first like 3 days of getting a hotel room. Finally, he had a stroke and died. So, this is the number of friends that have died due to direct negligence of the city is shocking. And I know many Food Not Bombs chapters around the world can report the same thing, that their friends ended up dying because they were not. We have this crisis in Sacramento where the California head of the task force on homelessness for the state of California, Daryl Steinberg, who's also the mayor of Sacramento, let 6 people die in inclement weather, and the city, somebody forgot to bring a key to open the emergency shelter at a hotel, at a library, so the people just sat outside. They use riot police and injured people in the clearing of camps. We've seen that an armored personnel vehicle was used to clear a camp in Bellingham, Washington. There's camp, and even though the CDC has made it very clear in their pronouncement in the right at the beginning of the pandemic that you should not do homeless sweeps. Cities all over the country are engaged in really vicious homeless sweeps.
Yeah. Well, LA is one of them too. I mean, we're doing a lot of sweeps. I mean, there was where I live in San Pedro, they were trying to do one. I think it was Christmas Eve specifically. They were going to do this brutal sweep, and fortunately the community got to stopped it, and they've been trying to stop them ever since. But it's
it's outrageous.
Keep doing it. It's absolutely outrageous. Where can people go to learn more about you and to get involved? And also, I know that you're working on a book.
Yeah, so they can connect with me and Food Not Bombs and their local chapters at foodnotbombs.net. And then we have a toll-free number, the Hunger Hotline, which is 1-800-884-1136. But you can find that under the contact section on foodnotbombs.net. And then I'm working on a book about my life and and events that occurred in my life, including Food Not Bombs, but other things like I lived on the border in Big Bend and used to play with my friends in Mexico and got cholera and was the only survivor of cholera in that community. At one point, when I was homeless in Boston, I had ice up to my knees, and I just was like at my wit's end. I spent a day trying to gather my wits to rob a McDonald's, and ended up that was not quite as successful as it could have been. So I have stories like that in this book. Trips to getting kidnapped in Nigeria while working with the Food Not Bombs in Nigeria. Things like that might be of interest to readers. And I've been working on it since 2003, and I ended up doing 2 books in between, which slowed me down. I wrote Hungry for Peace, and then I rewrote The Anarchist Cookbook. And boy, Trump, I've been able to pay my bills because of Donald Trump, because every time he mentioned anarchism during his reign of terror, I would get
more people would buy The Anarchist Cookbook.
Yeah, my publisher was like, man, don't let Trump leave. This is the best thing that's ever happened to us. Became my publisher's most popular book as a result.
That's funny.
So anyway.
Well, thanks so much, and I look forward to reading that upcoming book. And thanks so much for everything you do and for sharing some of that today. And thank you so much for still not giving up. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. And Melissa brings up a great point. She's like, "Why does the city allow food banks, but they don't allow Food Not Bombs?"
Okay, well, the answer to that question is a food bank is off on the edge of town, and it's for people who have homes. You need a kitchen to take advantage of a food bank. And that, so it's not politically bad, because it's people indoors. They're going to eat their food indoors. You know, they can set them up on the edges of town.
It's easier to keep it out of sight.
Out of sight. And
whereas you guys are directly helping the people who need it most, who are right there in the community.
Correct. And then we have
housed.
And we have the name Food Not Bombs, which has caused some consternation amongst people in power.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's incredible that there's people have an issue with that sentiment. Food, not bombs. Ooh, wait a second. Although, you know what, Keith, I will say, I don't know, maybe you just haven't been to the right restaurant, but sometimes, you know, you get your food with the side of bombs, and with the right kind of rye, it goes down great, buddy. It goes down. I mean, sometimes bombs are just a killer side dish, but they got to be prepared right. You really, whenever they nail it, I give my compliments to the chef. I'm like, these are the best bombs with food I ever had.
Yep, and a lot of people will say our food is the bomb.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for doing what you do, and thank you, Melissa, for your thoughts. Guys, we will be back officially for Get Your News On with Ron stream on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And in the meantime, go to Food Not Bombs. Wait, I got to get used to doing it right. This way I'm pointing at you, Keith. Foodnotbombs.net. They are doing amazing things. They have been doing amazing things for many, many years. And honestly, now that I think about it, they were my first exposure to imperialism, to learning about imperialism and the destruction of it. They didn't teach me that in school. I learned it at a Food Not Bombs booth at a punk show. So, Keith, thank you for that. And thank you for doing everything you do. Everyone go to foodnotbombs.net, and we'll see you Monday. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy, she says meow, and I say peace, and Keith says peace, and we say peace. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.